Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Sanhedrin Daf Samach Daled. This is one of the well-known dapim in Shas. It tells the story of how the Chachamim exorcised the desire for avodah zarah from the human consciousness, from the neshama. I don't know what word to put in there, from somewhere. And the Gemara also discusses here about the attempt at doing so with the desire for arayos. We'll discuss all of that. And of course, all of this is in the context of speaking about and learning about avodah zarah. Right now, we're 6 lines down on Samach Daled Amud Aleph Tashma. We have a pasuk that shows Vayizaku b'kol gadol el Hashem Eloheihem, and the Gemara says, "My Amr." What is this talking about? Amr Rav Yehuda v'item Rav Yonasan. Bye. This is like woe is me. Hainu de'acher ve'lebesa. This desire of avodah zarah destroyed our house. V'kalya lehechala, and it burnt the heichal. V'kadlinu letzadiki. And it killed righteous people, and it also exiled Jews from their land, and this Yetzer Hara of Avodah Zarah is still dancing between us, and that shows a very, very strong desire for Avodah Zarah. Klum Yahavte Lon Ela Lekabula Be'agra. Kodesh Baruch Hu, didn't you give us the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah just to give us schar? So here's our feelings on that matter. Lo ihu ba'inan, v'lo agre ba'inan. Please leave us alone. The Yetzer Hara is too great for Avodah Zarah. Get us away from that Yetzer Hara. Now, the reason why this is a question is because on the previous page, we had learned in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Marav, he had said that Yodin Hayu Yisrael ba'avodas kochavim she'ein ba'in mamish. He had said that really the Jews know that the Avodah Zarah are garbage. The only reason they did it was because they wanted to be matir arayos. But what do we see from here? We see from here that no, the Jews actually did like their avodah zarahs, kasha. So the Gemara says, first of the long lines, no, only basar de avikube. This pasuk was only talking about after there was an emotional connection to the avodah zarah, but at the beginning of the avodah zarah, there was no emotional connection. Yasvu tzlasa yome b'sa'anisa. There were people who sat for 3 days in Tainus. And why did they do this? Because they were about to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for something major. What does this remind us of? Esther, right? She sat for 3 days. When we want big things, we should try and fast before we make the request. And then Ba'u Rachme, they davened. And what they were davening for was to remove the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. Nafaluhu Piska Merikia. And they saw a note from heaven had fallen down. And there was one word on it, Emes. You're making a good claim. This is truthful what you're saying. It's good to daven to get rid of the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. This is a sidebar. Amar of Chanina, Shma Minacho, Samoshel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emes. Okay, no more on that topic other than to say that we use the word Emes, and the Chosamo of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Emes. So then the Gemara says, Nafak Kiguria Denura. Then out of the Mibeis Kodshe Kodashim, there was a fire that came out like a flame in the shape of a guria, like in the shape of a lion. Omar Lahu Navi L'Yisrael, the Navi who at that time was Zechariah, Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi were at the end of the period of the Nevi'im, and they were part of the Anshe Knesset Hagdola who helped to craft our Sidurim as we know them, with all of the features of Shmona Esrei, V'chule. And what did he say to them? Hainu Yitzra de Avodah Zarah. He knew what he was looking at, nobody else really knew. But this Guria Denura, this fire that looked like a lion that protruded from the Kodesh HaKodashim, was this Avodah Zarah. So what would you do if you saw that? Obviously, you'd grab it, right? You'd grab the lion of fire. That's what they did. Bahade de Katav Sele, when they were fighting with this Yetzer Hara, obviously, there's other things going on here that we don't understand. Ishtamid binisa mine. Some of its hairs fell out as they were fighting, and it hurt. Again, what are we talking about here? The whole thing is miraculous to start with. The Azal Kale, the voice of the lion traveled be'arba'amea parse, 400 parsa, which is a very long distance. Amru, Heichene Avid, what should we do? After all, the lion is crying because his hair got pulled out, and when anybody cries in pain, Dilma Mishmaya Merachme'ele, perhaps in heaven he'll have some rachamim on him, because when people cry in pain, that's the most authentic tefillah. We know from the Rishonim that while there is a discussion in the Rishonim if our modern form of tefillah is deraisa or derabanan, but lamaisa, when it comes to davening from a place of pain, everyone agrees that that's a mitzvah deraisa. So here you have this guria this lion that's made out of fire. One of its hairs fell out and it screamed, and they thought maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu would listen to him. Amar le Navi, Zechariah said to them, Shaju beduda de'ivra, put him inside a pot that's made of lead. V'chasiuha be'ivra, cover it with lead, deshayiv kale, and put it in there. Why? Because it'll be shayiv kale, it will slow down his voice, it will quiet his voice. Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Vayomer zos harisha vayashlecho sal tocha efa, put him into an ephah or a container that's the size of an ephah, vayashlech es ha'even ha'oferes el pia, and then they would cover it with lead. Amre, and then they were successful. So that part's left out of the Gemara, but they were successful at removing the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah.
They suffocated the lion and lead.
Suffocate is not the right word because he doesn't need oxygen, even though fire needs oxygen. But it's not, Pasha, not what it means. None of this makes any sense. In fact, there's a language that's used by Birchas Kohanim that, like, even a choma shel barzel can't stop the brachos of Kohanim, right? So here it's just interesting because who cares if he's inside the lead? That a Kodesh Baruch Hu can't hear someone when there's a physical barrier. Just like the tefillah of the Birkas Kohanim, the bracha penetrates. Why can't this? So, Gerald, I have no idea what the answer is to your question. What I would say instead is I don't understand the Gemara. And that there's Omer Dorsheni, none of this is Al Pi Derech HaTeva, none of this is Al Pi Apshat. There's so much more going on. And once they were on a roll, once they had a win, so that's an Eis Ratzon. That also implies that if a person davens for something and gets it, that's called an Eis Ratzon. Interesting diuk in the Gemara. I hope it's true. Amre, ho ve'eis ratzon, who since we were successful with removing the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, niboy rachme ayitzra de avera. Let's pray for the Yetzer Hara to do an avera. And Rashi over here says avera de avera. This is a third of the way down. Shel arayos. We weren't talking about stam averas. We're talking about the biggest of the avodas of the temptations, which is arayos. So bo rachame they daven, and guess what? Imsar biadayu. They trapped that Yetzer Hara in their hands. And chavshu tzlasa yomi. They held on to the Yetzer Hara of arayos for 3 days. Ibau biasa bas yoma lechola. And then they were looking for a fresh egg, a 1-day-old egg, for the sake of a chola. But the problem was, below ashkechu. They weren't able to find one. Because, and Rashi points this out, even the eggs that were mid-production, they did not finish their process. Namely, the internal organs that are used to develop things stopped functioning. The Yetzer Hara for arayos comes from a beautiful place, which is to procreate. But all the procreation in the world stopped, even whatever was mid forming. Okay, Amru Hechinavi. So the Chachamim said, what are we supposed to do? Niboy palga? Can we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for only palga, for only half? Because after all, a wife is mutter to a husband. I just want to make sure that I don't have a Yetzer Hara for anybody else. So that would be palga. Why don't we daven for that? So it says the Gemara, palga merakia lo yave. This is a well-known line. Actually, I thought the Gemara's line was palga min shemaya lo yave. I was incorrect. And even the correction here is not the one that you see on the side. If you have a correction, it's palga birakia instead of merakia. Either way, there are no halfsies. You're either in or you're out. It says the Gemara, kachlinhu la'ene. What they did is they blinded the Yetzer Hara of arayos in one of its eyes. Ahani be de lo igri inish bekrovte. And what that helped with was that a person wouldn't feel a challenge in regards to their relatives. It removes the desire for incest and for the desire of people who are family members. But that's the best that we could do. We couldn't remove the Isser of arayos. We couldn't remove the Yetzer Hara, I should say, for arayos from people who are not our relatives. Amar Yehuda Marav. There was a story of a non-Jewish woman who was very sick. Amra, she said, if this woman, referring to herself, gets up from her illness, if she gets healed, this is not a very good argument to stay alive, but she tried to argue, I will worship all of the avodah zaras in the world. So, she was healed, and she went, and she was servicing all of the avodah zaras in the world. When she got to the avodah zara of Peor, which itself is fascinating because it's to defecate in front of an idol, sha'ala lekomrem, when this was the first time she had seen it, and she said to the Komer, a Komer even in modern Hebrew is a priest, "Ba'meh ovdin lezu." How do we do this avodah zarah? I'm on the warpath. I'm trying to get as many avodah zarahs as I can. Teach me your ways. So the Gemara says, Amrullah, ochlen tradin, v'shosen shechar, matrizim bifaneha. You eat tradin, which is turnips, you drink beer, and then you defecate in front of it. That is considered to be the appropriate form of the avodah zarah. That's what you should do. That's what the Gemara says. So says the Gemara, Amra, mutav shetachzor isha lecholeha. Better that this woman, again referring to herself, should become sick again and not do this avodah zarah. This is ridiculous. She hit her limit, which is fascinating because what did all the other avodah zarahs look like? I'm sure none of them were givaldic. So says the Gemara, and then the Gemara levels a little bit of a criticism. The Gemara says as follows: Atem beis Yisrael einan kain. You, the Jews, you're worse than the Goyim when it comes to Baal Peor. Hanitz madin leBaal Peor. This is a pasuk in Bamidbar. The pasuk says, "Vayomer Moshe el Shofte Yisrael hirgu ish anashav hanitzmadim leBaal Peor." These people were nitzmadim; they were tzamud. They were connected deeply to Baal Peor, kitzamid psil, like the cover on top of a bottle. What about the fact that the pasuk says that the Jews had dvekus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Yeah, that wasn't a full dvekus, but rather that was kishtei tomorrow's hadvuko zu bezu. You have two fruits that are jammed together. They're easily peeled apart. Just pull on them. It's not so hard. They're not really stuck together. So this shita, we'll see soon, a contrasting shita. This shita felt that the Jews were worse about Baal Peor at that time in history than the Goyim. However, b'masnisa tana, we're a little bit more than halfway down. Hanitzmadim leval peor kitzamid al yedei isha. No, when we talk about the Jews and how tzamud, how connected they were to Baal Peor, it was like the bracelet of an isha. What about the bracelet of an isha? Well, they're usually not so tight; they move around. So yes, it's connected, but it's not fixed, right? It slides around a little bit. It's not. It's there. It's real, but it's not a deep, deep connection. This shita held that the Jews were more interested in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they were more davuk in HaKadosh Baruch Hu than they were in regards to Baal Peor. Tanu Rabban, the Gemara tells a fascinating story. Maisa besavta ben alas. This is the name of a man, actually. It's not savta like a grandmother. That's what the letter saf. This is a test. Ben alas. Shehiskir chamor lenachris achas. He had a donkey, and there was a woman who hired him to take her around on his animal. Kevan shegia lepeor. The Jew was walking the donkey, and when they got to the Baal Peor storefront on whatever street, Amrlo hamteinat she'ekanes veitze. I'm just going to go in here. I'll be back soon. I'm going to go do some avodah zarah. I'll be right back. After she got back, she sits down on the donkey and she said, "All right, I'm ready to go." No, Amar, he said to her, give me a few minutes. I'm going to go into Baal Peor as well. Amar lo velo Yehudi ata. You're a yid. What do you mean you're going to go do Baal Peor? I'm a goy. I understand why I'm doing Baal Peor, but you're a yid. Why would you ever do such a thing? So says the Gemara, Amar la umay ichpas lach. What is your problem? I don't share with your business. You don't share with my business. Leave me alone. I can do whatever avodah zarah I want. But really, this guy had a goal. This Jew wanted to make a bizayon out of Baal Peor. So here's what he did. Nichnas. He went in. Pa'ar b'fanav. He went to the bathroom. He defecated. But as a shtach, to make sure the avodah zarah, so everybody knew that he wasn't serious about it, the kineach bechotmo. When he was cleaning his body after he went to the bathroom, he did so on the nose of the statue of Peor. Aye, that's a bizayon, right? Not in their eyes. The Gemara says, the guys who were in charge of the avodah zarah are like, wow, this guy is committed to the cause. I've never seen anybody serve this idol so beautifully like you did. But this is a problem because even if you're trying to make a bizayon out of an avodah zarah, if the actions that you do are in line with the avodah, even if your intention is to make a bizayon of the avodah zarah, it's still asur. Ha'poer atzmo lebal peor hareza avodaso afal gav de mechaven lebizui. I know what you're trying to do. I get it. I understand your intentions, but that's still a problem. If I take stones and I pelt them at this type of avodah zarah called markulis, you're chayiv because the avodah zarah is to throw stones. You're throwing the stones to hurt it. I know, but the optics are not good, and therefore that would not work. Rab Menashe Havaka Azil Lebei Torah. He was going to this particular place. Amrlo avodah zarah he dekoy hacham. He says that this particular avodah zarah is shakal piece. He picked up a piece of dirt and shadabe. He threw a piece of dirt at it. Amrlo markulas he. You're not allowed to throw anything at it. It's markulas. So if you're throwing at it, that's its avoda. You're trying to make a bizayun, it doesn't matter. But he argued, no, that's not true. Amar luhu hazorek even limarkulas tanan. He said, I'm not trying to do something for the avodah. I'm throwing something at it. I'm not trying to throw something to it. It says the Gemara asa sha'al bei medrash. She went to ask a shaila. Amar le hazorek even bimarkulas tanan. Anything. Afal gav de mechav and the mirgamat's aser to do that. Amar lahu ezel ishkale. If I threw it already, maybe I should go back and pick it up. Can I undo my avera? A little lav hanitak laaseh. If I already did my avodah zarah and I threw the stone toward Markulas, or I threw the dirt, should I go back and chop up what I? So the Gemara says no, you should not do that. Amar le echad hanot lav echad hanos nachayev. Removing it's also a problem. Putting it there and taking it away because kol chad v'chad ravcha lechaver tashavik. No matter what you're doing, you're making a space for other people. The isser is done. You removing the dirt from there will just enable another person to have more room to put the dirt in there. You've already done the isser. We are now going to talk about molech. And in fact, we'll see soon that there's a machlokas tanaim about molech. Is molech inherently an avodah zarah, or is it something that people kind of converted into an avodah zarah? Let's see what's going on in the Gemara. But first, let's start in the Mishnah. Hanosein mizar lemolech. If a person gives of their child over to molech, he will not be held accountable until he first has to be handed over to the molech, and he also has to be placed in the fire. We're going to learn what it means to place in the fire. If masar lemolech v'lo ha'avir be'esh, if he was handed over to the priests of this avodah zarah but not placed in the fire, or the reverse, ha'avir be'esh v'lo masar lemolech, or he was put in the fire but there was no molech, eino chayav ad sheyimtzor lemolech v'ya'avir be'esh. He will not be held accountable until he does both. The formula for the Isser of Molech is to be passed over to the company for Molech, to the guys who are in charge, and then to put him through the fire. So the problem is that this Mishnah seems to be divergent from the previous Mishnah, because the previous Mishnah referred to it as Avodah Zarah, and here it only doesn't say that. There's no words Avodah Zarah in this Mishnah. Tani Avodah Zarah a few blot ago, Tani Molech over here. So how can that be? Is this an Avodah Zarah or is it not? So Amar Rabbi Aviv, Tnan Kiman de Amar Molech Lav Avodah Zarah. It must be that because this wasn't included in the Mishnah that said Avodah Zarah, so therefore it must be that Molech is not an Avodah Zarah. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Here's where we are going to see our machlokas. Echad the Molech ve'echad l'shar Avodah Zarah chayev. Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon Omer lemolech chayev shelo lemolech pater. So over here, what we see is since it's not actually an avodah zarah, it's really not a categorical avodah zarah. It's only if it's turned into a molech. So the Tanakama holds that the molech is an avodah zarah, and Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon holds it's not. Amar Abai, Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon, Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, Samar Davar Echad. They both say the same thing, that molech is not categorically an avodah zarah. Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon had the Amram. We just saw his sheet on the brisa 2 lines ago. Where is the Marimakum for Reb Chanina ben Antigonus? The Tanya, it's right here. We have a brisa. Reb Chanina ben Antigonus Omer Mibnei Ma Tafsa Lashon Tafsa Torah Lashon Molech. Why did we call this Molech? Says the Gemara, Kol Shehim Lichlu Aleim Afilu Tzror Ove Afilu Kisei. And this is where we see the deeper svara of why Molech might not inherently be an avodah zarah. I took this and I made it an avodah zarah. I took an inanimate object. It's a twig, a phone, whatever. Anything, a pencil. I could make it into an avodah. So yes, you could make it into an avodah zarah, but it's not be'etzem like Markulas that is an avodah zarah. They're different. And that is the sheet of Reb Chanina ben Antigonus, who says that it's because Kol Shem Nichu Aleim Filu Tzrora Filu Kisei. Rava Amar, I actually disagree with something that you said. Abaye had said that Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon and Reb Chanina ben Antigonus were holding the same thing, that Molech was not an avodah zarah be'etzem. He says, I disagree. He says, Molech arai ikabenayu. If there's temporary Molech, there's a difference between them. And just look at the very last part of Rashi on that page, where he says, Rebbe Lazar Reb Shimon lo mechayev ela b'molech kavua. And Reb Chanina would say that you'd be chayev even with Molech arai. That brings us to the top of Samach Daled Amud Beis. Yirtzeh Hashem, we'll get to the very bottom of the page, and then tomorrow we'll start with a fresh Mishnah. Amar Rav Yanai, Eno Chayv Adshim Serenu Lemishar Se Avodah Zara. How do we know that you're only Chayv and Molech when you hand them over to the Avodah Zara? Shneimar Mizarcha Lo Sitein LaHa'avir LeMolech. And Tanya Namihachi, I can prove this to you. Yachal Ha'avir V'Lo Masar Yehei Chayv. How do we know that if you place them in fire, but you weren't Moser the child, that you're not Chayv? Tamalamar Lo Sitein. Masar lemolech v'lo ha'avir. What if he was handed over to them but not put in the fire? Yachol heichayv. You might have thought you were chayav. Tamaloma, you're not laha'avir. Masar behavir shalom lemolech. You did this, but it wasn't for molech. It was done for a different purpose. Yachol heichayv. Tamaloma lemolech. Masar behavir lemolech v'lo be'esh. Let's say that you did pass through, but there was no fire at that time in the place where there's normally fire. Yachol heichayv. Ne'amar kan lahavir v'ne'amar laholan. Lo yimatzei b'cha ma'avir b'no v'to be'esh. Ma'laholan be'eshav kan be'esh. Then therefore we know that there has to actually be a fire. Umakan molech, aflahalan molech. It also has to be a case where you made that thing into a something. You were himlichu that item onto you. Next, we're a quarter of the way down on Samach Dalad Amid Beis Amar Rav Acha Brei Rava. Have your kol zaro pater. If a person were to give over all of his children to Molech, you'd be pater. Why? Shnemar mizar acha v'lo kol zaracha. Beautiful diuk. Whoever would have thought? If you have all your kids, you're not. That's amazing. The Isser D'Oraisa dissolves. It's an unbelievable thing. It's not logical in regards to logical progressions. If we would have thought as a balabatim, however many children you have, you multiply the number of molechs by the number of children you have. You give them all. It says the Gemara, no. If you got 4 kids, 1 plus 2, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 0. You violated no molech, which is just incredible. Not even an Isser D'Oraisa. Maybe it's because you're a meshuga. Maybe we have to paskin on you now that there's something wrong with you. It's an unbelievable thing. What if the person was blind? Yashin mahu, if the person was sleeping. Ben beno, ben bito mahu, if it was a grandchild, would you be held accountable for molech? So says the Gemara, look, I don't know all the answers, but I do know a little bit. Tifshod miachad, I can answer one of them. Detanya, kimizar nasan molech ma tamulomar. What does that pasuk teach us? The pasuk says explicitly, beno vito. Them I know, my son, my daughter. By molech pashad, I'd be chayev. How do I know about ben beno uven bito minan? How do we know that there would be an isser to give over a grandchild? Tamulomar. Bisito mizaro, from any of your children. Okay. The Gemara says, Tana, we have one brisa, pasach b'chi mizaro. One pasach, which is the new brisa. The recent brisa speaks about ki mizar nasan lemolech. And v'salik, and it ended with besito mizaro. So it says the Gemara, really drasha acharino, we can give a different kind of drasha. Zaro, ainli elazar kosher. I know that only if my child was born of a union where the child is therefore kosher, that there's an isser. Zera pasal minayin. How do we know that if the child was born from an inappropriate relationship, from an illicit relationship, that he would still be chayiv, the father would still be chayiv in giving over that child to molech, tamolomar v'sito mizaro. Amar Rav Yehuda, we're halfway down on Samach Dalad Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Eino chayav al achi avirenu derech ha'avara. You have to bring it through the fireplace. Hey chidami, this is a machlokas. Amar Abaye, shraga de livni b'mitzi. There was a path to walk between the bricks. Nura mehaigis of a nura mehaigis, and there were fires on both sides, and you would walk between, or the child would be walked between. Rava Amar, no, it's kimashvarta de Puria. It's like the jumping on Purim. So apparently this was normal, that on Purim they would stick around, they would jump over a pit where there was some fire or some kind of... So we don't know exactly what the scenario is here in regards to the fire from Molech, but it does seem like Rava is right, because Tani Kavasi the Rava Beregel Pater, if you walk through, you're going to be Pater, period. And therefore he holds it's Kimashvarta Depuria, that you're going to be Chayv only if you jump over the flames. It's only for your descendants. If you take your parents, it's definitely not good kibud avaim, but you're not going to be chayiv molech. The isser of molech only applies to descendants. What about have your atzmo? What if a person puts himself through molech? So then the Gemara says pater. Rabbi Lazar b'Reb Shimon chayiv, and we're going to analyze this in a moment. Echad lemolech ve'echad l'sharvo d'zara chayiv. Whatever you do, you're going to be chayiv. Rabbi Lazar b'Reb Shimon omer lemolech chayiv shelo lemolech pater. This machlokas we saw in the previous Amud. So Amar Ula. Ula wants to know, my time with Rabbi Lazar b'Reb Shimon, who said that have your atzmo pater. If I walk myself into a molech center and I walk through the fire myself, I give over myself, I walk through the molech, through the fire, why am I not chayiv? Because Amar Kara lo yimatzei v'cha v'cha ve'atzmecha. I Rabbanon, how could you say you're going to be chayiv then? The Rabbanon held that if a person walks himself into the Molech center, he's going to be chayiv. But why would you be chayiv? We have the word v'cha. Says the Gemara, we don't darshan the word v'cha v'Rabbanon, lo darshi v'cha. I v'hatnan, yes we do. I'll show you where we darshan the word v'cha. Says the Gemara, v'daso v'avedasa aviv shelo kodemis. If I've lost two items and I only have the capacity to find one, forget my father. I'm supposed to find my own. I mean, in my time, efes kliya v'cha evyon. So we see shelo kodemis l'shel kol adam. So we see the word v'cha is darshaned. If the word is darshaned over here, then maybe it's darshaned over there. Maybe Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is right that have your atzmo pater, because v'cha is v'cha ve'atzmacha. Says the Gemara, you've made an error. The Mishnah that speaks about Avedas Avedas Aviv was talking about a different part of the word, about part of the pasuk. Hasam me efes. How did the pasuk start? Efes kilo yevacha evyon. The word efes is the drasha, not the word v'cha. So then we can understand the shita of Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, who says that you're chayiv if you take yourself to Molech. We're on the first of the very long lines, 7 lines from the bottom of the page on Samach Daled Amud Bey is almost done for the night. Amar Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina shalosh krisos b'avodah zara lama. We have the word krisos multiple times, 3 times actually, when it comes to avodah zara. Let's say why. Achas lechadarka. One is for when you worship the avodah zara in the normal way. Ve'achas leshelo kedarka. One is when you worship the avodah zara in an abnormal way. Ve'achas lemolech. And one of them is for a different case, which is when you violate molech. Yuleman amar molech avodah zara he. According to the sheet of the Tanakhama that we saw on the bottom of Samach Daled Amud Aleph, who says that molech is avodah zara. Kares b'molech lamali. Then I don't need the word kares because molech is not the same ballgame. Molech is the same ballgame as avodah zara. Says the Gemara, l'ma'avir b'no shelo kedarka. That's if you hand over your son, which is shelo kedarka. That's what we would need the case of kares for. According to those who say that blaspheming Hashem is avodah zara, I already have one kares to teach me about kedarka and shelo kedarka by avodah zara, that there's kares. But if megadef is the same, why do we have the extra kares reference by megadef in the Chumash? So the Gemara says l'chedatanya, because the pasuk says he kares. This pasuk says, and I'll read it in full: Ki devar Hashem baza bes mitzvah so hefar he kares hanefesh ahi avonaba. So why does it say he kares a double language? He kares ba'olam hazeh. You're going to be cut off in this world, and tikares, you will be cut off. We have another reference as well. You want to say tikares, one's talking about olam hazeh, one's talking about olam haba. That's a beautiful drasha, and I understand. But we have a third reference, and we don't have 3 worlds. So how do we understand this? So it says the Gemara, hikares olam haba, and tikares is dibator kalashim adam. There, it's just tikares is the way people talk. So really, there's only 2 references. One's for Olam Hazeh, and one is for Olam Haba. That brings us to the end of Samach Daled Amud Beis. We'll stop right here. In Yirtzeh Hashem, tomorrow we'll learn Daf Samach Hey, and as well, a little bit, at least, of Daf Samach Vav. Wishing you all a beautiful night.